Hey folks, Dustin Siggins here with Proven Media Solutions. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Cracking the Comms Code. Sorry for the technical snafu. We run a PR firm over here, not a tech firm, so I did the thing we all should do, which is hit off and on, and it seems to have worked magically once again. So thanks for joining us. Sorry to be a little bit late. We have Brendan, Molly, and Ashley, and what we're going to talk today about is how important it is for PR professionals to come out of the shadows in 2026 and how to do it on LinkedIn. And so, if each one of you could introduce yourselves, Molly, Ashley, and Brendan, and then we'll kick off into where each of you has your areas of expertise and what you're going to bring to the conversation.
Hi, I'm Molly Johnson. I'm founder of Three Brooks Marketing, where I work with individuals to build their personal brands. And my claim to fame is working with Dustin on his personal.
Hi, I'm Ashley Mann. I am the co-founder and CEO of the CoLab. So we work with mostly B2B technology companies. Yeah, and I'm really excited to be here today and talk about how LinkedIn has impacted our business.
Yeah, Brandon Watts, director of PR and comms at Storyblock. Been in PR for 20 some years. Been at Storyblock for 4.5 years. So been through all the different phases, but I fought social media, and here I am. So I'm happy to have this conversation. And I've done this with Dustin a few times, so we always have a nice chat. And nice to meet
Yep.
Molly and Ashley. Looking forward to it.
You know, Brendan, you and I met, actually, I met all three of you through LinkedIn. I met Molly 2 years ago in a comment section, and then we did an op-ed together, and then we started working together. She's our LinkedIn consultant. Ashley, this is today, actually, on our prep call was our first time meeting, but we've been connected for well over a year. And Brandon, you and I connected and really started doing this episode of the show, about 15 months ago, I think, or about a year ago, on the basis that we started our journey around the same time. And you have a really fascinating story. We'll get to that in a moment because your journey is fantastic. But I want to actually have Molly jump in first here because the last three shows have focused on job seeking, and LinkedIn, of course, was always part of that conversation. And one person said, "It seems like you have to be like a digital superhero. You got to go viral and to be seen as important enough, or big enough, or smart enough to get hired." And Molly, I'd like for you to dispel that rumor right at the beginning here that she needed to go viral on LinkedIn in order for it to be valuable to you.
Yes. So I would say some of the loudest voices on LinkedIn are often the influencer creator, content creator types. And that leads most people to believe that that is the case, that you have to go viral. But I would say at the end of the day, I think the goals for either business generation or finding another job are actually more towards the relationship building side. So I would separate the two categories and say there's the influencer content creator goals and there's the relationship building goals. And you don't need to have a giant audience in order to develop really important relationships that will advance your career or help you land clients for your company. And that can be done in a very small audience. But it comes down to knowing what you bring to the table and understanding your brand strategy.
And Ashley, I remember Lizzie telling me something along the lines of that you've driven a ton of business through LinkedIn. Can you dial into that for a few
Yeah.
minutes?
Yeah. So I think my LinkedIn journey specifically really started by just saying the thing out loud that nobody wanted to say in our industry. And I started doing that about 5 years ago before it was really sort of the thing that was popular to do. And at the time, it was a little bit of a risk because there weren't a ton of communications or PR people that were coming out and kind of talking about the industry in a way that wasn't as polished, that wasn't as, promotional about the company
Mhm.
itself. And so I think that helped me get sort of a foothold early on in my LinkedIn content journey. But what I found that really resonates, that continues to perform for our business as a whole, is, you know, having some personality, being a little bit off the cuff, not being so polished. These are things that we talk to our clients about a lot too. But yeah, we've been really, really lucky that several of my posts, several of Lizzie's posts have also, gone a bit viral, I guess you could say, and has led to a lot of business. And that's great from like an influx standpoint. But what I think has generated the most business for us over the long term is just being consistent, being real, helping people feel connected to you and really fostering that relationship aspect like Molly was referring to.
And Brendan, when you got started, can you give the audience a little bit of background? You said earlier you were resistant, and now here you are. I think you have a fantastic story, and if you could have the capstone of that story be what you shared on the prep call about how you hired someone earlier this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reluctant for the social media stuff. I even wrote an article for Pando Daily, if the old timers in this crowd remember that outlet. Ashley's nodding. We're not old, Ashley. We're young at heart. Uh, but Sarah Lacey at Pando Daily, I actually, if you go to the Internet Archive, you can find it. I wrote an article, Why a Publicist Shouldn't Tweet. And I got flamed for that thing. Like, I got flamed. But it was an interesting perspective because at the time, it was like the risks outweigh the benefits. That's the way it felt. And I think that was, that was a bubbling up perspective. But what really led me to start to lean into it, I'd say about 2 years ago, is at Storyblock, I inherited the social media team. And that was under my purview under PR and comms. So it wasn't a separate function. And I was like, I can't lead this team and not be on social. And I was like, that's just ridiculous. Because I had managed social for brands for years, even though I wasn't on it myself. So there wasn't that problem. I mean, big brands. So I knew what to do. I just didn't want to do it for myself. But when it was under my team, I figured I got to actually walk the walk here. So I decided to start doing it. And the first, few months were pretty cringe, of course. You're being too promotional, you're not having fun. And then I just started to Ashley's point, be real, say the thing that people are too afraid to say, wrap it in humor, and then everything changed from there. The least promotional you are on LinkedIn, the more promotion you get. It's unbelievable. So that's something I always try to tell people that reach out to me and are like, I'm trying to get started and I've been following you for a while. You can get promotion by not talking about yourself. You talk about how you think about your work, not talking about your work. And that has been something I've learned time and time again. But to your real quick on your point on hiring, yeah, we did hire a couple people a couple months ago, and LinkedIn was a great channel for that. People that had followed had reached out to me and wanted to interview. And in fact, one of the ones that had reached out that saw me on LinkedIn, we hired. So there's so many benefits to it. It's hard to describe, but it's the thing that has been the best for my business and kind of overall career has been doing this, posting nonsense once a day on LinkedIn. Even at my level, it's been amazing. So no regrets.
Molly, when we started working together almost 2 years ago now, it was September of 2 years ago. Um, it was a really interesting journey for me because we had made an entire pivot as a company from doing it in person, me going to the B2B world in Northern Virginia, to pivoting to targeting communications agencies, consultants, and in-house teams as our target audience. We realized that I only had 25 connections in the industry, and we had done enough business in it that would justify trying to add another 5,000. But what you really had to drill into me over and over again was user experience. And these are my words, not yours. User experience over trying to gin up the algorithm. We talked about that here on the prep call, where everyone's trying to get the algorithm and figure out what the new changes are. And so can you dive into that a little bit from the best practices perspective? Because again, a lot of people are going to say, well, I posted for a month before and I didn't get anything from it. There's a lot of that frustration that I see whenever we have this episode.
Sure. So I would say it's kind of a two-part answer. On one part, you have the platform's interests. So if we think about LinkedIn, I like to explain why they do what they do before I explain what they're doing, because I actually think that unlocks a lot of mental roadblocks for people. And the other thing too is a lot of my clients, they're not hiring me to do what they can Google search. And so when I explain the reasoning behind why platforms are making these decisions, it helps them anticipate future decisions and understand what they can do with their posts. So in the platform's interest, their number one goal is always to get people to use and stay on their platform. And so everything that they're doing and changing is to keep people engaging and looking at more content and being on their platform longer. And I would say on the other side, what you were saying about user experience is when you're trying to create content or engage with people, you're thinking about how you can provide value and using a relationship first model instead of and this goes back to sort of the content creation. It's not about like what will go viral and how can I play the algorithm. It's more about how can I be useful to the people that I'm trying to serve. And so when we think about things today and what the platform's doing, this all makes sense in this context, right? We're seeing AI content get picked up more where they notice it, and so it's getting punished because that's not really serving to post something that you can find on a Google search is not going to serve your audience. It's the understanding behind, like Brandon had a great example of like understanding your reasoning behind the work you do or the way you think, things that people can't find from Google searching or finding articles. The other thing I would say is what matters a lot more than I think it used to do is the hygiene of your profile and making sure that your profile really speaks to who you're trying to reach. Because the way that the algorithm in 2026 works is it's trying to show your content to the types of people who will engage and find your content interesting. And your platform is, or your profile is really speaking towards that audience that you're trying to connect with. And so making sure that everything on your profile displays the type of person that you're trying to connect with and what you can do for them is way more important than it's ever been.
Now, Ashley, one of the things we talked about, what Molly described about community, I spend a ton of time every day. There's a block in my calendar for 30 minutes where all I do is engage on everyone else's posts and my own for some of the algorithm stuff. I like it, I make a comment, other things. Do you take that same effort? Because again, you've had a number of posts go viral that bring in a lot, that brought in a lot of prospective business. What is the process you use? Because you can't just post, right? This is a collaborative community environment. That's what Molly just described. Can you explain how you've used that collaboration aspect in your LinkedIn practice?
I think, my strategy has shifted over the last few years where it used to be very much like what Molly was saying, where I was constantly researching and reading about what would perform best on LinkedIn and what I needed to be doing and trying to follow the algorithm. And I still get sucked into that sometimes. I'll see an article that's like video is the only way. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to record,
Right.
4 videos a week?
Right.
And really, over the last year, it has pivoted much more to be about me speaking when I think I have something of value to say, because I've just found that the other content, even if I'm chasing the algorithm, even if I'm posting, 7 times a week, doesn't perform to the same standard. Now, there is a balance, there's a tipping point to that I've discovered after, being on the platform for so many years of you have to post consistently, but you have to make sure what you're posting consistently is adding value. To Molly's point, just saying something to say something is not really helping yourself out in the long run. So I am probably a little more type B about this than the average, person who's performed really well on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But I don't have a set strategy. Like I post when I feel compelled to post something, and then I comment on things that I actually find really interesting and that have provided value to me. And my goal moving forward is to put some more structure around that. I think that would probably help me out greatly. But honestly, our business has grown so much over the last few years, and much of that came from LinkedIn directly, that I haven't had as much time to dedicate towards, growing my profile as before. But we do look at it as one of the major leading channels for our organization. So we do put a lot of time into like our company page, making sure that Lizzie and I's profiles are updated and appealing to the right types of people, to Molly's point, making sure that she and I are engaging as frequently as we can on other people's content, those types of things. So not as structured and as disciplined as yours, Dustin. Like I want to get to that point, ideally soon. But yeah, we still see a lot of success, even from just interacting organically.
Brad, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I relate to the I don't have a strategy part. I I I prefer to, yeah, I mean, the great thing about doing this for a while is, a year ago, everything I posted was fresh and new, and I tend to post evergreen stuff. I really like the people that get in there and respond to something immediately. And whenever I've done that, it seemed to work really well. So I aspire to do that more. But a lot of it just tends to be truths that I can recycle, or observations, or fake conversations between a company and their PR pro. That stuff always just goes off on LinkedIn. People relate to that stuff. So a lot of it was fresh. And now recently, we're all busy. Our careers go in phases where we're just slammed. And so, for instance, right now, that's kind of where I'm at. Got a lot going on. So I've been recycling a lot of stuff from 6, 7 months ago. And that's been fascinating to watch. There's several things I've posted 4 times now, over the course of a couple years plus. And it's amazing to see something get 23 reactions the second time, 800 the third time, 53. It's just, it really proves the algorithm is just all over the place. But I think my main lesson to share with everyone is it's intimidating to feel like you have to post something new every time. But if you do this long enough, you can recycle stuff. It's not going to kill you. People, not everyone's going to see it. If it's really good, people will like to see it again, like a rerun of a television show. There's like comfort in seeing something that you liked before and you see it again, you know, not a week later, but months later, where it feels fresh to people. So, yeah, I don't have a strategy. I just try not to be salesy. I try to be honest and try to find the humor in a tough situation. And that's always worked well for me. And I'm not trying to grow by leaps and bounds. I have no goals. I'm just showing up daily to see what happens. And I think that's what's helped me stick with it.
And let's talk about value there, Brandon, because again, you have a full-time job. This isn't designed to generate business, though it did generate a staffer.
Mm-hmm.
But also last year, what was it you spoke at last year that came from your LinkedIn presence?
Yeah, no, I've had some cool opportunities. You know, some podcast interviews have popped up. I'm sure for everyone. I know this is for Ashley and Molly, for you too as well. I'm sure it's, you know, I did a meltwater panel. I did a PRSA event in San Francisco. Like I said, a couple podcasts, a couple media opportunities have come in for my company. So again, even though I'm not out there promoting my company every day, I pick the right time to do it and put a little spin and story behind it versus like, check out our new product. There's always something to personalize it a little bit. So Storyblock has gotten plenty of proactive outreach just through me being out there. So, you know, it checks that box as well. So the value's definitely there.
It's interesting from, a business generation standpoint. We have a number of employees now. We've grown a lot over the last year specifically. And over the past several months, we've been doing a LinkedIn competition. So enticing our employees to post more on LinkedIn and share their perspectives and let our potential clients get to know them a bit more too. And it's been really fascinating to see, people who didn't previously post very often or have a big LinkedIn following, how their journey has gone. And I want to emphasize to everybody that you don't have to have started this 5 years ago. You don't need to be one of the first people saying the thing. You just need to be somebody saying something interesting consistently. And we've seen that across our team. People who just started posting over the last month or two are still getting incredible engagement, building their own personal brands, driving attention to the collab as a result, and having really great success, even though they have no prior experience doing this. So there's still room if you want to jump in and start interacting.
Well, and Molly, I think I'm evidence of the fact that there's always room, because 2.25 years ago, nobody in the communications world knew who I was. And I mean that literally. They knew like 25 people. Now I have something like 5,300 connections in the industry. I have a show that I've done every week except for the 2 weeks around Christmas last year. And I'm interviewing people for op-eds. I've met Lizzie, Ashley's business partner, at least 5 or 6 times on Zoom. She's been on the show twice. And that comes from the strategy we've talked about, the consistency. I, like Brendan, I schedule out ahead of time. At least half my posts are reused. In fact, I did one on Saturday. That was I'll pull it up here just to show an example. This is a post that I do about every 3 months. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I mentioned Mark Cuban. This quote plus mentioning Mark Cuban gets everybody to scroll down. And yeah, it got 63 engagements. You'll notice it didn't get 100,000 impressions. It didn't get 200 engagements. It doesn't get as much engagement as what Brendan's talking about. But this is the kind of thing that I would prefer to have 60 of the right engagements than 800 of the wrong ones, because I'm trying to generate business from what I'm doing here. And so I think it's really important for people who are listening to listen to what Ashley said about the value driven in just a couple of months of consistency, that there is room. Because again, I'm not an AI person. I'm not going out there throwing bombs, but I found a couple of what Molly would call content pillars. And I've just stayed very consistent on those over the course of time. And what I find is that when I meet people, they say, I've been following your stuff for months. I'm so glad to have finally met you. And I don't know why, because I'm not saying anything special in my world. And so Molly, I'd love for you to, kind of use me as a case study. Tell everyone where I was 2 years ago and the journey that you went through with us. Because I think where I was 2 years ago, other than being very aggressive and proactive, I really was similar to a lot of the people we're talking about or watching.
I'd also like to add, I think you were burnt out. You had been kind of burnt out by the turn on LinkedIn of always coming up with content. I know you were doing a lot more news related content and not doing a
Sure.
lot of repurposing.
That's a good point.
And so I think, you felt like you always had to have something going on in the news. I think you spent a lot of time hunting for topics
Yeah, you're
instead
right.
of getting really clear and consistent about what your audience needs from you. And so that's what a lot of our work came down to. Like we talked a lot about audience pain points and like where can you add specific value and unique value in your industry that others can't provide. And so there was a lot of like thinking through more, I'd say like bigger picture, zooming out a lot when we first started to get that clarity that helped you develop those content pillars that which then became like your marching orders to
Yes, they did.
uh,
I've never
and I,
deviated.
yeah, and I think that that took a lot of the fatigue
Yeah.
away because the fatigue was coming from like always having to hunt for a new topic or like what's going to have me go viral, which goes back to sort of what we've been talking about a lot of this conversation is that's using LinkedIn like an influencer or content creator when
Mhm.
your goal wasn't necessarily to be that, it was to drive
Right.
business. And that is where I think the shift happened when you realized all the relationships you could build out of it. And a lot of your content came from actually conversations you had with other people in your industry. We've talked a lot about how you can utilize comments. And that's something that has changed on LinkedIn since we
Yes.
started working together, is when we first started working together, they did not track the impressions for your comments on
Yep.
LinkedIn. And that's a great source of content ideas because you find out what's resonating with people and what they're interested in by
Yep.
commenting other people's posts and then seeing that that's getting traction. And that gives you an idea for another post. So that is something that I think is a value add that the platform has given us since that would be 2024.
No, it's a really good point. It goes back to engaging with people, building that community. Because again, my post actually just the other day, Molly, I called you because I was concerned. My numbers were down. I was really concerned because my impressions were down, my engagement was down. And I said, what am I doing wrong? No, so I fixed the algorithm somehow. And you said, no, you need to engage more. And I went back from engaging on 5 to 7 people a day to what I should have been doing from the start, which is 15 to 20. And the reason that people want to connect with me isn't because they see my little post that got 12 engagements per se. It's because they see me as value add as when I'm on Ashley's post and I say, or it was Lizzie's post about a year and a half ago. She had 3 tips for XYZ. It was a great post. And I said, well, hey, here's a step 4 we use. And Lizzie's response was, that's a great point, Dustin. I'm really glad you said that. Or today, somebody talked about their newsletter. Someone at Carve Communications, and my comment was, that's a great newsletter. I love how you dialed into ABC. That's a really value add because most people miss that point. And sometimes I'm asking people questions or I'm saying, hey, I want to correct you on this thing. It's a conversation that I'm creating. And that leads to a lot of people seeing me as a value add potential partner. And again, my target audience is the people on this call, right? But if you're out there looking for a job, you shouldn't be trying to talk to me. You should be trying to talk to the people who are going to be your hiring manager. You should be trying to reach your target audience, which is why, for example, a lot of Lizzie's posts that I've noticed at least really in the last year have dialed really sharply, I think, Ashley, into here's what the tech leaders need to know now.
Yeah.
And so can you explain how she's dialed into that a little bit?
I think what's so interesting is that your audience can shift over time, right? Lizzie and I really started off talking kind of, I don't want to say commiserating, but a bit with other PR practitioners and talking about the challenges in the industry. And that built us up a good source of connections. And at some point, when we started to look at LinkedIn as an actual business driver, we had to sit down and analyze, who's interacting with our posts, who are these reaching, and is that the right audience? And
Right.
in a lot of cases, that meant pivoting away from speaking solely to a PR audience, which is still our, tried and true. We love connecting with other people in the industry, but it pivoted a bit towards how do we connect with CMOs at major technology companies,
Right. Exactly.
chief communication officers, like those types of people that we're trying to reach. And the message is different, right? So you have to really be willing to do some research and dive into exactly what your target audience needs to hear or is looking for from somebody in your position and cater a lot of your content around that if your goal is to drive business, right? So we focused a lot more on that in the last year specifically. I think it's working extremely well for Lizzie, particularly because she has such a great style of writing and she's so direct. She just will really give you the information up front, which I love.
If everyone here knows what a dictionary is, I'm not sure we all do at our ages, but she would be next to the word direct.
Yes.
Yes,
So,
yes,
but
exactly.
that works so effectively for her on LinkedIn,
Right.
and it's so true to her personality that
Correct.
the whole thing, in combination, just really has driven a lot of business for our organization. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what we focused on. I think another key component of that is, yes, it's about the business. Yes, it's about driving leads, but it's also about helping people see who you are and what they're going to get if you work together, right? Like Lizzie's personality is exactly the same on LinkedIn as it is when you talk to her, as it is when you work with her, as it is across all engagements. I try to be the same way. And that leads to this sort of like thought leadership consistency that I think performs really well when you do it over a period of time, right? I think with AI, changing everything, and we talk a lot about the AI slop on LinkedIn, people really just want to feel a connection to who they're doing business with. So the more you can push that across the platform, the better your content's going to perform. And the more relationships you'll develop and hopefully clients at the end of the day too.
Brandon, you haven't said anything in a while. You want to jump in?
This is a great conversation. Yeah, the AI thing is so interesting. So I've never used AI for any of my, I'm not judgmental of anyone who has because it can be
I
an
have.
accelerator. Yeah, it's a great accelerator. Just because of the stuff I write and the way its tone,
Right.
it just comes from me directly. It's not really broad stuff. It's more like in my perspective. So I write it naturally. But yeah, I think that point about attitude is so even
Yeah.
more than what you say, it's how you say it. And people just respond to that. Because I think it was mentioned by both Molly and Ashley of, we could all sort of say the same thing. There's a lot of comms pros out there saying similar things. Like I'm sure I post things similar to Ashley and, Lizzie and all them. And I know I do, like Perry and some of the big names out there. But
Right.
you just that little take you have on it is what people respond to, and not being afraid to go for it. And I mean, that's really what it is. Write the post that AI can't write. AI can't write your own personal stories. So the more you share your own personal stories, the better people are going to be like, this guy is real. He's not just, saying, write me a joke about comms. Give me 10
Right.
versions. So I know people do that and it might work for them sometimes, but that's just not the way I've gone with it.
Well, and to your point, Ashley, about what it's like to work with somebody. Something that I reached out to Molly a few months back. It was I said, hey, I guess maybe it was last summer, Molly. I said, I'm a little concerned about my content. Oh, it was in February. I reached out to you in February and said, my content isn't quite performing like I want. And you took about a minute and you went, well, I'm not seeing any stories. I had forgotten to include client stories. And what that means is not bragging about client doing, we did an amazing thing for a client. It's hitting a pain point that we then exemplify. It brings the reader down the journey of what it's like to work with us. And I think that that's very, Lizzie does that exceptionally well when she says, here's a thing that, tech leaders need to know. I'm really interested to see what these three things happen over the next 6 months. That tells any tech leader reading that she's paying attention and she's looking forward 6 months as to what's coming down the pike. We should work with her because she's seeing the future in a way that maybe we're not.
Yes.
Again, it's not a post that has to get 1,000 impressions and maybe only gets or 1,000 engagements. Maybe it gets 50 from the right people.
Yeah.
And so, Molly, can you talk a little bit about making sure that you're not salesy, but you are providing that kind of story? Again, when we talked earlier this week, it was the same thing. I said, oh, I'm kind of hitting big on news stuff, like my post today. And you said, fine, Dustin, but remember, that gets good engagement, but it's not actually going to tell someone what it's like to work with you. And so can you distinguish between a salesy post and those that provide that journey example in a value add way?
Sure. I think pretty much everyone who's a PR professional knows probably the statement show not tell. And so I think it's much more powerful when you show something and you explain how you got there, because right now everybody's telling. And when we were talking about like stories, and I think, going back to your example of like, do I do I talk about what's happening in the news? I actually think that those are useful posts when you show how it demonstrates your chops.
Right.
Like that is what people are, well, what you want them to walk away with. It's not the direct thing that they're going to say, but that is your goal, is that they walk away and they say, Dustin knows what he's talking about, and I should hire him because he can help me get to whatever place that, especially if there's transformation within your story, that he can get me to hear. And that's why I should hire him and call him. And so, I mean, we've all seen it. Transformation is one of the most powerful stories that one we can use. Like I was here, then I'm here. And so telling your client stories in like a transformational attitude is actually way more powerful than just like a news story, like what, when, where, and why.
Mhm.
Because the transformation leans on an emotion. And we can look at the stories that resonate with big audiences. I'll out myself. I love Devil Wears Prada. It's such a wonderful movie, and like I was so excited to go see the sequel. But what is at the heart of that first movie is a transformation story, and that's what we're all attracted to. How did the frumpy intern become the you know, chic assistant that could then go on and become a top journalist? And that's the same sort of story that you want your salesy posts or your client posts to tell, because that's what's going to resonate at a deep emotional level and not get scrolled past because it's another pitch.
Mhm.
I think the story component is so interesting, and the few posts that I've had go viral all had a really strong story hook. And in fact, not all of them were even work related. My first post that ever went viral that got 10 million impressions, which is crazy, was a story about starting my business and having my husband support me, and
Yeah.
challenges of being a working mom and all of these things that during that time, which was, in the midst of the pandemic, other people could really, really relate to. And I found that on a consistent basis is, that combination of a little bit of personal, a little bit of client, a little bit of work, a little bit of news, to your point, Dustin, works really well because people feel like they get a holistic sense of who you are. Not only, how it is to work with you, how you think about certain things, when you're keeping up on the news, what you feel about the industry, but also who you are as a human. I found that component is really important too, if you're willing to share it, right? Not everybody's willing to be as open, but.
Right. So everyone who's watching this, please ask a few questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. We would have had 25 if, I didn't have the tech snafu, but we'll make do with what we have. Let's talk about specific tactics. Let's talk about specific best practices. One of the things I've consistently realized is that a lot of people think it's all about the post. When I was in my 20s and lifting, heavy weights, I thought it was all about the lifting. I didn't realize how much. I knew I had to, eat and hydrate and get some sleep, but I didn't realize how that really 80% of getting stronger is your rest, hydration, nutrition, and I'm forgetting one of the other things, and sleep, versus just pounding out the weight all the time. Similarly, on LinkedIn, I have a trap I fall into about every 2 or 3 months, and I fell into it in the last week. And Jalissa, who's our sales director, kind of rapped me on the knuckles today by email, because I've had a few like really good ideas about newsy posts, and one of them went up today. It hasn't done as well as I hoped. Perhaps I should have kept the original scheduled post because I would have spent less time on the post. I have a tendency when I have ideas to like really dive into a post and suddenly it'd be 10:15 at night and I'm like finishing this post and I realize, oh shoot, I could have spent 45 minutes with my wife instead of 45 minutes on a LinkedIn post because I had plenty to schedule. And so I'm a big believer in, yes, you have to have your posts. To get stronger, you have to lift weights. But that's just the basic foundation. You have to get out there and engage with people. You have to follow some of the best practices, like don't put your link in the post, make sure you have a good hook and other things. But realistically, I think there's a lot that people focus, I think, too much attention on the post because a lot of my posts I don't think are fantastic. But when I engage properly with other people's content, when I create myself as part of the community, that's what creates the engagement on my stuff. So I would like to talk about some of the best practices so that people walk away with specific tactics that they can execute 15 minutes from now. So we want to go Brendan, Ashley, and Molly. And I have to tell my kids to be quiet, so I'll be right back.
Well, I think this is an example of something I do not do well. So part of it is just by the time I devote to LinkedIn. I don't have that block time to go engage with a bunch of people. I think if I was running my own business, I would definitely switch up how I treat LinkedIn. Keep in mind, I have a job, and so I'm not, I have different priorities really. It's building personal brand and helping, prospects understand certain things about content. I talk a lot about content, which is what Storyblock's behind. So it all interrelates. But I've said this every time we talk, Dustin, I still haven't got better at it. I still aspire to be like you with the commenting strategy. It's so impressive how you just appear to be everywhere all the time. And it's amazing. And here we are, right? We've known each other because you commented on a post and we had a chat and it led to this. And
Actually, I'm going to interrupt you. We got to know each other because I shared one of your posts. I reposted. This is before they punished you for reposting for some reason in a community-oriented platform. We shared one of Brandon's posts, added my own commentary, and it was the first post I ever did that got more than like 500 impressions. It got like 18,000 impressions and like 105 engagements or something. And so I shot you a note and said, I'm glad yours went viral, but I kind of stole yours. That's how we actually first originally chatted.
That's right. That's right. I don't even remember the post, but yeah, that's crazy. But I really, again, if I had a different set of circumstances, I know I would prioritize this. And I actually have a post idea, which I'm probably going to get to, which is like, hey, everyone, I'm going to spend the next day just commenting on LinkedIn posts full time. Like just to see what happens, like an experiment. Since I don't do it, I'd love to block out a day and just go crazy on comments and see what the ROI is. Not that it's going to be immediate, but just to force myself into the practice. But that is something as a failure on my side, I need to be better about engaging. I'm really good about engaging with who engages with me, but that's not the way the platform works. You should be social on the platform. And so I still need to work on that. And I think it's a matter of scheduling it. I simply don't schedule it, but I need to do that. So hopefully 3 months from now, Dustin, I've learned my lesson after saying I need to do it so long. But
I've been saying that for about a
um,
year. Yeah.
yeah, I
But
know,
again,
I know.
but
So
but
don't
but
follow that example.
well, but again, the fact that you post every day has helped your post go viral and helped you get these speaking opportunities and other things. So even without that engagement, you've generated value for your company, including hiring somebody. So there
Yeah.
is that value in just posting consistently. Go ahead,
But
Ashley. I didn't mean to cut you
I
off.
just I was just gonna say I admire the people who do. And when I see the names that are big that do it, it's incredible that they're prioritizing that. They're really setting the good example so I can learn from everyone.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we just have or I personally have a high bar for content these days. Like I have just really tried to get away from I think one of the hardest parts about being so active on LinkedIn is coming up with consistent content that is actually providing value. There's days you go on there and you're like, gosh, what am I going to say today? And and I find that those posts obviously don't perform as well as the ones where I actually have a really strong POV. And so I've tried to really focus my time and energy, knowing that I don't have as much to dedicate to LinkedIn as I used to, on saying things that I think really provide tangible impact for the people that are reading them. So that's been a lot of my strategy over the last 6 months, I would say. I want to get better at the commenting part. I know that that's a huge thing and is so important, and that's definitely one of my goals, moving into the back half of 2026. But yeah, I think it's fascinating the connections you can make and the, business you can derive just from participating in the platform. It's really not that hard if you can just set the time aside. So yeah, I aspire to be more like Dustin with your strategy and your time commitment set aside for this. And yeah, it's really aspirational.
Well, Molly will tell you that I spend a little too much time on the platform, more than I need to.
I think we've hit on a lot of the big parts, which is having a good profile, having good content. And I'll just add one thing that we haven't talked about with the content is something that is helping content perform better is if you get more sends and saves of your
Yep.
content. That is something that is a new update. And I think it's important to note back to my know the psychology behind why a platform would do that is important is that you're demonstrating that you give value and that it's valuable enough for people to want to come back to it and or give it to somebody else. And so those are really key, because the algorithm is just you know trying to scroll through what they can understand. They can't understand every bit of language. They can't process a lot of the humor sometimes. And so what they can understand is that this is content that's worth showing to more people because of these values. And so, yeah, definitely creating content that's shareable and savable is something that is huge right now. And then, yeah, you all have had lots of good points about comments. So, and then I think last thing is like knowing what your niche is and
Right.
being willing to like call out your audience sometimes, like say like who you're talking to and making sure that you're consistently talking to the same people. So I love what Ashley said about how they had to go back to the like whiteboard and figure out exactly what audience that was the most impactful for their business. And so being ruthless at pursuing that and knowing what you can provide them is really important in today's algorithm because like I said, they're really trying to figure out who to share your post with. And so a lot of it is coming down to the kinds of topics and keywords that you're writing about. And so that's going to help your posts be more visible to the right types of people because you're telling LinkedIn who to show it to.
One thing that people often say is, well, I don't have anything special to say, right? I've said this 40 minutes ago. I don't think what I'm offering is, some special sauce. And yet we grew 75% last year as a company, almost all of that through LinkedIn. Referrals and other business came directly through LinkedIn this year, likewise. And what I want to make sure I tell everyone is what 5-6 years ago, I got myself published 13 times at Forbes. It drove exactly 2 prospects. They were both a gigantic waste of time. And I mean like 20 hours with each prospect trying to get them to sign big contracts so they had champagne taste and beer budget. And I didn't know how to do a scope of work conversation and other things as the business owner. But the reason I bring this up is a sales mentor of mine said, Dustin, why are you talking about debt in a company or team building? And I said, because they're good topics and I like them. She said, sure, but that's not your specialty. Yes, you think you're talking about it in some special way because you're not an expert in it. Someone who's an expert in those areas can look and say, well, that's pretty basic. Why am I reading this? And she told me to dial in more into marketing and communications, which I did. And then she said, dial even more, really into media relations. And I said, there's not enough for me to say on that. And I said the same thing to Molly 2 years ago. She said, only talk about media relations. And I said, there is not enough for me to say. To Molly's point about being ruthless, I now have 6 posts a week. I do 2 to 3 op-eds under my name every month and a show every week. I have tons of content that is almost exclusively focused around media relations, PR best practices, and occasionally best practice of running your own company. That is all that I talk about. And the idea of being ruthless can be scary to people. But here's the thing. The lawyer is the coolest person in the room of accountants, and the accountant is the coolest person in the room of lawyers. If your communications content is ordered toward your external audience who doesn't know PR like you do, you are going to look like a freaking hero. Whereas if you're trying to talk to Ashley or Molly or Brennan or myself, we might say, yeah, that's cool. Great. There's a like, but we're not going to reach out to you for business because you're not trying to reach us. And so the more that you talk to those people who don't know what you know and customize it to the pains that they have and the solutions they're looking for, the better off you are. So the word ruthless has a negative connotation, but Molly's exactly right. Look for the pain points and do not deviate at all. And you will find there's a lot more stuff to say when you're that disciplined, because if you're trying to reach everybody, you're reaching nobody. The last thing I want to say is, I want to just dial into before we do a round robin, is being that disciplined and putting it on your calendar. I spend about a half an hour a day. Again, I schedule, I do other things. I have a team, I have a sales support team that helps me a lot with LinkedIn. But realistically, even if I was doing my own content every day, I would only be spending 45 minutes a day on LinkedIn, maybe 50. And that is because we worked with Molly to really dial into what I needed to do. And so I don't want people to get scared that they're gonna have to spend 4 hours a day on LinkedIn. To Brandon's point, I appear to be everywhere, and it's not because I have an AI bot. It's because there's a bookmarking system that Molly taught us, where I literally have 20 people a day that I'm scanning. That system allows me to look at everybody and go, oh, I'm gonna hit these people on Monday, these people on Tuesday, these people on Wednesday. And it really allows me to engage with them. Here's the other thing. when I comment on somebody's post from today and they reply 4 hours later, that's tomorrow's engagement too. So I get to cheat by using the same post 2 days in a row, by responding to somebody who responded to me. So the engagement strategy is actually something easier to start with. If you're going to start somewhere, I'd suggest starting there because you're building community and it's easier to read someone else's thing and react to it and say, that's a great point. Here's something on top. Or, hey, that's a great point. I'm going to challenge you on this part of it. And so it feels a lot safer. So I would suggest starting there.
And Dustin, it's going to give you a lot of content ideas and help you figure out what your niche
Yes,
and your
true.
content pillars are.
Yes, great point. Yep.
I would also say if you're starting with that, engagement strategy, make sure that your profile is very clear on who you are, because I think that's one thing.
Yes.
I'll see an interesting comment from somebody, I'll click on them. And if I don't know who they are or what they're about within the first 15 seconds, you tend to move along, right? So you want to make sure that if people are, looking at your profile, checking you out, that they have a good reason to click the follow button because they know kind of what they're going to get by, continuing to follow you. So, kind of doing that profile hygiene up front, I think is really important as well.
Yeah, and I just say in closing, so I took the opposite approach, although that's exactly what I would do if I was starting from scratch, is to comment and work the muscles of writing and getting perspectives to expand into post. But since I have a Word doc or, a text document that's got like 300 ideas, I just write down random little thoughts and 2-word prompts. I've got enough to work with that I always have something next that I can draft in 15 to 30 minutes. So it's not a big time commitment each day. And then like I mentioned, I'm recycling a lot of stuff. So it's even less time commitment each day. But for me, the daily habit really is to go into reactions. I want to make sure I keep up with people who take the time to respond to me, or I want to make sure I acknowledge them and respond to them, that repost what I post. So that is a daily habit, as well as messages and follows. I track that stuff every day because I just want to stay on top of it. If someone's engaging in the moment, I want to check them out. Do I follow them? Do I connect with them? Most cases I do, because I am targeting a very specific person. So I'd say it's about a 90% connect rate of like, yeah, that's actually someone I want to follow too. So that's my reciprocal thing. I need to be better about commenting, but I make sure if anyone takes the time to acknowledge or follow, I want to know who they are and acknowledge that they did. So that's my daily habit at a minimum.
And the last thing I want to close on is something that we've all said in different ways, but the greatest value isn't necessarily going to go viral. It's no different than PR, where if you want to reach someone, if you want to reach the potential buyer, you're going to tell your client, go get the trade mag. Trying to get in USA Today feels good, but it's what's the phrase we always use, Molly, that I'm spacing on? It feels good, but it's nothing about no value there anyway.
Yeah.
And it's because you have to make your message so diluted in USA Today versus a trade mag where the buyer is going to see it and see that value. And so it's the same thing when you're treating yourself as a client to come out of the shadows here on LinkedIn, is take that same approach. And actually my post promoting this show makes that exact comparison. The 6 steps of PR are the same for the 6 steps on LinkedIn. So if you're feeling intimidated and you want to come out of the shadows, start with commenting. Start with commenting on people who are your ICP. Take that time that Molly talked about and Ashley talked about. Every 3 to 6 months, make sure that you are targeting the right people because it's easy to get distracted. I did it in December of 2024. The numbers were crashing. I was engaging on anyone who was there, and it killed me in January because my ICP wasn't on LinkedIn in December. And I got stressed about it. Molly wasn't even worried. And she didn't know how stressed I was for about 3 weeks until she finally just said, in a very kind way, back off, Dustin. There's no need to keep harassing me. I promise. Christmas is around the corner. And she was right. But the problem is I was so desperate. And in January, I had to revert back to my ICP because I engaged on the wrong people. And so it's really important to stay that course and be disciplined and revisit your ICP every 3 to 6 months. Make sure your content is matching who you actually want to reach. So sorry, this one has to be a little short because of a technical snafu, but I figured, you should all probably, actually be able to hear me on my own show. So I just had to reboot my computer. I'll close with responding to Colleen's question here. Since we're all on LinkedIn or LinkedIn Live, thoughts on LinkedIn Live versus other tactics. I would strongly recommend against doing LinkedIn Live for any variety of reasons, including the fact that the back end is an absolute headache. Also, last year, LinkedIn put a lot of effort to saying videos are big, and they were, on the video on the advertising dollars LinkedIn spent, and they did nothing for anyone. Anecdotally, everything I've heard is that videos didn't work. So Molly, I tend to notice that text with a photo, with a reasonably relevant photo, does exceptionally well.
So are we talking about for engagement or audience building, or are we talking about for relationship building? Because I think that LinkedIn Live has been a rock star for you for relationship building, because you're allowed to now ask people, and people who don't have time necessarily for an hour-long conversation with you would be willing to come on your show and talk to you for a long time, and you get introductions that, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like you get introductions that are different and new. And I would say, though, for engagement, yeah, you're right. It's not the best engagement driver, but it's a great way. And I would say the same thing actually about podcasts in general. Podcasts are a great way to forge introductions and build relationships, and not necessarily the best way to get the biggest audience. Or at
I
least
like
the
being,
easiest.
I like being corrected on my own show. I was thinking more about
Sorry.
the ease of transition for someone who's new to
Oh, yeah.
LinkedIn.
No, it's
Trying
definitely
to,
hard.
yeah, LinkedIn Live is a nightmare. This thing has not been updated in like 10 years.
It's the
So
worst live streaming I think that any social media platform has.
yeah,
It's
no, you're right.
I think
Yeah,
you're
so
killing
I
our-
don't recommend using it unless you're like really want to take the time. Go ahead, Ashley. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I said I think you're killing our chances of getting this promoted with all the LinkedIn LinkedIn Live
Yes,
bashing.
the algorithm, the AI system is going to catch that we are actually truth tellers about the platform.
Yeah.
But to close, people have been bashing the LinkedIn algorithm for a long time, but it was actually Noah who pointed out it actually was working better than people realized, because your impressions might have been down, your engagement might have been down, but those with whom you were engaging was actually better. And so again, it's really important that you understand, you don't have to understand things as well as Molly does about LinkedIn, but you should understand what, as she put it, why they're doing what their goals are, which helps you explain why they're doing what they're doing. And then actually go back and look at your real numbers. Because when I saw Noah's post about the algorithm being better, I said, he's wrong. And I went, we did a check, and oh, he was right. My numbers were down in every way except engagement compared to impressions was up. And that's a way more important metric.
Yeah, something just really quickly anecdotally that we've noticed is we're getting a lot of inbound business inquiries from people who don't actually follow us, but they still say that they saw us on LinkedIn. So even though somebody might not be following you or engaged,
Huge metric.
yes,
Yep.
exactly. You're getting a lot more views than you probably anticipate.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, so folks, I got to wrap this one up, but this was great. Ashley, it was so nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for
Brandon,
having
good to see you again. Molly,
course,
always
always.
happy to brag about you.
No,
So,
thank you. I always appreciate
So folks, again, if you're looking for work, make sure you hit up Ashley. I think Ashley said you're hiring,
Yes.
and that if you want to get hired by the collab, make sure your LinkedIn profile looks good. Always engage with Brandon, because he's not going to engage with you. And then if you want to get better, definitely reach out to Molly. She will help you. She will set you up for success. So thanks, folks. This was a lot of fun. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Justin.